As communism gained a larger foothold in Europe in the post-war period, the subsequent Second Red Scare erupted on American soil. Paranoia made it feel that everyone was a potential communist spy or sympathizer. These fears led to the development of a general sense of conformity within American society, especially in the middle and upper class, because aberrant behavior could lead to suspicion falling upon yourself and your family. But it wasn't just the fear of being red that created suspicion. There was another scare sweeping through the government. I'm your host David, and this week we are going to take a closer look at another early Cold War color scare in the United States, the Lavender Scare. This is the Cold War. I have been a passionate learner my entire life, which is why I am so glad to be working with the sponsor of today's video, Magellan TV. Magellan TV offers documentaries on a wide range of topics, including personal accounts of eyewitnesses to history. The Crater, a true Vietnam story, tells the story of an Australian Vietnam veteran and his life journey to deal with the ghosts of his time in Vietnam. You can join us and watch this documentary by using the link in the description. Don't forget to check out other documentaries in Magellan TV's War and Military section to learn more about the experiences of other soldiers in Cold War combat. And the good news is Magellan TV has much more than that. There are more than 3,000 documentaries waiting for you, and hundreds of them are on the history of various eras. I really love the biographical documentaries on Magellan TV as they detail the life and times of history's prominent figures. New documentaries are added weekly and available on most devices, including phones and PCs. Magellan TV has a kind and exclusive offer for our viewers. Click the link in the description to get a 1-month free trial and watch hundreds of history documentaries anytime, anywhere. The 1950s and 1960s saw the rise of the term lavender as a code word for homosexuality. Senator Everett Dirksen stated that a Republican victory in the 1952 election would mean the removal of lavender lads from the State Department, and in 1969, Betty Friedan would comment on how the Lavender Menace, meaning lesbians, would destroy the credibility of feminists. Therefore, titling this 20th century moral panic the Lavender Scare is actually pretty fitting. While the topic of same-sex relations may have been glossed over or even a bit taboo for most of American history, with sodomy laws dating back to the early colonial period in the 1600s, the fact is that most of these laws had not been strongly enforced, and most did not even specifically target same-sex relations. It wasn't until the 20th century that American culture began to seriously enforce sodomy laws, and with that came additional risks for homosexuals. This was likely magnified by the fact that homosexuality was becoming a subject that the public was itself becoming more aware of with the publication of Alfred Kinsey's Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, published in 1948. Okay, with that background, let's look at how this manifested in the early Cold War. On February 9, 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy made his infamous claim of having evidence of 205 known communists working at the State Department. 11 days later, he revisited the issue with a lengthy speech on the Senate floor, which offered more specifics. It was in this speech that he made the link between homosexuality and communism. But this wasn't out of the blue, mind you. Prior to McCarthy's statements, anti-homosexual programs and laws were already beginning to appear in America. Beginning in 1941, the military discharged suspected gay men with so-called blue discharges. In 1946, the State Department had begun more stringent security checks, resulting in several homosexuals being fired. In 1947, the U.S. Park Police began the Sex Perversion Elimination Program, which targeted gay men for arrest and intimidation, and even labeled them as mentally ill. This atmosphere of institutionalized oppression towards homosexuals, especially homosexual men, was an ideal breeding ground for McCarthyism's anxieties about communism to become enmeshed with fears about homosexuality. McCarthy claimed that intelligence officials had told him that, quote, practically every communist is twisted mentally or physically in some way, end quote, and it was from there that McCarthy made the logical jump that because homosexuals were mentally ill, or as he put it, had peculiar mental twists, that they were more susceptible to communist recruitment. There were also concerns that homosexuals were more at risk for blackmail by the Soviets, making them a greater risk for national security. A week later, Deputy Undersecretary of State John Purifoy, the same Purifoy who would go on to be US Ambassador to Greece and then Guatemala, revealed the firing of 91 homosexual employees from the State Department as they were deemed security risks. And with that, the Lavender Scare was officially off to the races. 2 government committees were formed during this time to investigate the issue of homosexuals employed by the US government. The first, which operated from March to May of 1950, was known as the Wary Hill investigation, and consisted of only 2 men, a bipartisan team of Republican Senator Kenneth Wary and Democrat Senator J. Lister Hill. Unfortunately, very limited records from this investigation have survived, but we do know that they heard testimony from the head of the DC Metropolitan Police Department, Vice Squad Lieutenant Roy Blick, who claimed that 5,000 homosexuals lived in Washington, D.C., and that 3,700 of them were employed by the federal government. Figures, by the way, that appear to have absolutely no basis in fact, but were highly reported by the media at the time. Lieutenant Blick also claimed that since the committee had begun their investigation, almost every agency of the government had sent an official to him in order to ask Blick about his knowledge of any homosexuals employed by their agencies. Blick believed that around 100 moral perverts had recently resigned or been fired since the Wary Hill investigation had begun. The Civil Service Commission sent recommendations to the Wary Hill subcommittee on suggestions for a routine procedure to rid the offices of government of moral perverts and guard against their admission. These suggestions included a recommendation that all arrests related to homosexual activity should be reported to the FBI so that the Civil Service Commission could be alerted, thereby ensuring that all federal employees arrested for reasons related to sexual perversions could be removed from employment. Both Senators Wary and Hill believed that this information meant that a wider investigation was required, and on June 7, 1950, the Senate resolved to undertake a more comprehensive investigation of the alleged employment by the departments and agencies of the government of homosexuals and other moral perverts. On the Senate's recommendation, the Hoey Committee was formed, a much larger undertaking. Far from the 2 members of the Wary Hill, this investigation had 7 senators and various other investigators and clerks. Included on the committee were Chairman Senator Clyde Hoey, 3 Democrat senators, James Eastland, John McClellan, and Herbert O'Connor, and 3 Republican senators, Carl Mundt, Andrew Schopel, and Margaret Chase Smith. Senator McCarthy was on the subcommittee originally, but ended up excluding himself from the investigation, although he did periodically forward information on suspected homosexuals to the committee. The Hoey Committee sent out questionnaires to all branches of the military, as well as 53 civilian departments and agencies. Committee investigators also interviewed agency officials and summarized these conversations in memoranda. The agencies came out strongly against the suitability of homosexual employees in the federal government. In Secretary of Commerce Charles Sawyer's response to the committee on July 24, 1950, he said, "The privilege of working for the United States government should not be extended to persons of dubious moral character, such as homosexuals or sex perverts. The confidence of our citizenry in their government would be severely taxed if we looked with tolerance upon the employment of such persons." However, some responses took a slightly less aggressive tone, including this statement from Howard Colvin, acting director of the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, on July 31, 1950. "Since it is possible, according to our understanding of medical and psychiatric opinion on the subject, for a homosexual to lead a normal, well-adjusted life, we do not consider that such a person necessarily constitutes a bad security risk. We believe that each such case would have to be decided on its own merits." Not exactly an endorsement of civil rights for homosexuals, but certainly a bit more progressive a stance than most of the government were expressing at this point. However, many investigations began to have greater and wider impacts. Government employees could not even resign quietly without having the permanent tag of possible homosexual on their record. At the end of their investigation, the Hoey Committee issued a report entitled Employment of Homosexuals and Other Sex Perverts in Government, which indicated, among other things, that during the 3 years of the committee's investigation, close to 5,000 homosexuals had been detected in the military and civilian workforces. Additionally, the Hoey report also indicated that all the government's intelligence agencies are in complete agreement that sex perverts in government constitute security risks. The report concluded that gay people should not be employed by the federal government because they were generally unsuitable and constituted security risks. In addition, it reported that gay people had a lack of emotional stability, weak moral fiber, and were a bad influence on the young. The report warned that, quote, one homosexual can pollute a government office, end quote. This report would go on to be highly influential in shaping government security manuals for years after the investigation concluded. Now, the committees were only the beginning, and the Lavender Scare continued to have impact across many areas of America. In 1952, for example, the American Psychiatric Association only further established the idea that homosexuals were mentally ill when they officially classified homosexuality as a sociopathic personality disturbance in the first Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. 1953, President Dwight Eisenhower codified the discrimination against homosexuals in the government with the signing of Executive Order 10450. The order viewed any number of things as a risk to national security: immorality, drug addiction, excessive drinking, and sympathetic associations with any anarchist or revolutionist were all on the list, along with sexual perversion and anything that might furnish reason to believe that the individual may be subjected to coercion, influence, or pressure which may cause him to act contrary to the best interests of national security. Once the executive order went into effect in May of 1953, the number of suspected homosexuals dismissed from government reached about 60 per month, usually because of evidence that in reality amounted to nothing more than rumor or innuendo. In 1953, the State Department reported that 425 employees had been dismissed for allegations of homosexuality. Once, at a press conference, McCarthy said, quote, "If you want to be against McCarthy, boys, you've got to be either a communist or a cocksucker." This created an atmosphere where any disagreement with McCarthy could find you investigated as a potential subversive. Paranoia led to an almost aggressive pantomime of heterosexuality among male government employees, especially those employed by the State Department, where the highest amount of suspicion was placed during the early days of the Lavender Scare. In David Johnson's book, The Lavender Scare, The Cold War Persecution of Gays and Lesbians in the Federal Government, he said that one man admitted to introducing himself at parties by saying, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, I work for the State Department. I'm married and I have 3 children." Like a 1950s version of no homo. Now, while male homosexuals were more often targeted during this period, lesbians were by no means immune to the Lavender Scare. There developed an extreme witch hunt to remove lesbians from the military. A report from investigations at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi stated that, questioned as to the alleged homosexuality, the girls, being sick of the worry and strain of being under suspicion and being promised that they would receive general discharges if they confessed, all proceeded to do so, and after confessing were informed that it wasn't enough to incriminate only themselves. They must write down also someone else with whom they had homosexual relations. Those who were removed from the military faced undesirable discharge, which meant that they would no longer be able to vote, work for a government affiliate, or be involved in any way with a state-run organization. Lesbians with civilian jobs in the government, the same as male homosexuals, were considered to be security risks. One 1950 article in the Chicago Daily Tribune, titled "Senators Learn of Immorality in Washington," addressed the problem of lesbians within the government. The article described an example of 40 to 50 lesbians with government jobs who took part in sex orgies, which were filmed by foreign communists, who then blackmailed the women into giving them secret documents. Except there was no actual evidence of this claim, only a speculation of a hypothetical situation, but it accomplished the goal of making sure investigating senators saw lesbians as a threat just as large as that presented by male homosexuals. The paranoia of this witch hunt naturally expressed itself in popular culture. The 1950 book, State Department Murders by Edward S. Ahrens, used the rumors of homosexuality in the State Department as major plot points, describing it as rumors of trouble in the State Department with abnormal personnel who were open to morality charges, with the eventual ending using a gay love triangle and a plot to sell secrets to the Soviets to explain the murder, once again tying the evils of homosexuality, communist sympathizing, and treason together for the American public. The impact of the Lavender Scare even carried outside the American government and across the 47th parallel into Canada. There, a similar movement to remove gay people from the civil service was carried out by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the military. Funding for the project was cut off in the late 1960s, but a number of government employees lost their jobs before that happened. Another notable oddity of the Canadian Lavender Scare involved the creation of the fruit machine by Frank Robert Wake. A subject was placed in a chair with a black box located in front of it that displayed pictures which ranged from mundane to pornographic photos of both men and women. It was believed that the pupils would dilate in relation to the amount of interest in the pictures in a technique termed the pupillary response test. This would, theoretically, allow the testers to tell if a subject was sexually aroused by same or different sex pornographic images. Of course, the machine was built entirely on false scientific principles and methodology, but that didn't deter its use. Historians estimate that at least 5,000 and perhaps as many as tens of thousands of gay government employees lost their jobs during the Lavender Scare. Some faced continued unemployment or underemployment, exclusions from their professions, financial strain, or even ruin, as well as considerable emotional distress. Suicide was not uncommon, and the damage done to lives and human potential as a result of mindless paranoia is nearly incalculable. It would not be until 1975 that the Lavender Scare would truly end, with the Civil Service Commission announcing new rules stipulating that gay people could no longer be barred or fired from federal employment because of their sexuality. This would only impact civilian employees, with the lasting discrimination against homosexuals in the military continuing for much longer. Just one more of the broad-reaching effects which the Cold War brought about to Western society. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and to make sure you don't miss all of our future episodes, please make sure you're subscribed to our channel and have made sure to press the bell button no matter its race, creed, or sexuality. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our supporters, and if you aren't already a patron, please consider supporting us financially at patreon.com/thecoldwar or through YouTube membership. We can be reached via email at thecoldwarchannel@gmail.com. This is the Cold War Channel, and as we think about the Cold War, I will leave you with the words of JFK. In the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal.